Greetings. Today's video features a 1947 National amplifier with all sorts of unusual features and a very, let's just say, unpleasant past, okay? It didn't always look like this. I think it would be instructive first to take a look at how it appeared when I first got it. Sadly, I didn't have a video camera when I first took possession of the mighty National amplifier, and as you can see, the condition was just atrocious. The top is all dry rotted. The handle, I don't know if you can see it clearly, has been caved in, which is no easy feat. I'm surprised the whole top wasn't caved in. Open glue joint over here, just thoroughly dry rotted and tattered. Let's take a look at the rear. At least it does have the back door. We're missing screws here on the rear grille. We do have the National serial number here that helped me to date it to 1947. You can see the handle here crushed along the top. Pretty shabby. Now in the front is even worse. We've got big open cracks. The plywood's all delaminating. It's just coming apart from moisture. We see over here the National logo, which would have been a nice plus. There's not many pluses involved, but that would have been a very pleasant thing to still have attached, but of course not. Along here on this lovely grill cloth, it looks like either somebody took a can of spray paint or I think a cat backed up to this and just sprayed it. Showing its utter disdain for the condition, I guess, and I don't blame it. I was tempted to do the same thing. But you can see outside is just irreparable. It's just a mess. Now the worst view I've saved for last, and that's the interior of this beauty, where the floor is completely rotted. I mean rotted where you could push and just push through it. Okay, it must have been sitting in water. Over here is the original, well, no, it's not original. Nothing's original. The power cord thoroughly encrusted in rodent droppings. And then the top of the line realistic Radio Shack speaker has been crammed in here. You know, it just sent shivers up my spine to see that. No cone. The cone's just all shredded. And then somebody had the audacity to put a tag on here proclaiming that they were responsible, I guess, for this speaker. I think they should be hunted down and prosecuted, actually. And then one of the great highlights was the output transformer is nailed to the front facing of the amplifier, which is just a real class move. Okay, so as you can see from the inside of this, most people would probably put on a surgical mask and take this to the dump if the dump would accept it. I was feeling adventuresome, so I decided to fix it up. And let's take a look at how it turned out. Now, whenever I get an amp that has absolutely no redeeming features, I tend to get a little creative. You know, I'm a real stickler for originality, but when the item is just in such hideous condition that restoring it is almost impossible, I try to make it a little better than it came. So this is the outside of it, and as you can see, I used some material that sort of resembles the original color. This is a thicker and much better quality. Sort of a naugahyde material. I decided to go with two-tone because this is a big amp, and I thought that all one color would be a little boring. There was no name tag, as you remember. There was one over here, which I could not duplicate, so I made this and tacked it on. A lot of the amps a little bit later, let's say in the early 50s, had a script logo like this. Okay, I used a sort of an alligator grain material, the same that I used on my the Fender Reverb clone that I made. You see, I straightened the handle out a bit, and the plating was just hideous, so I did it flat black. Okay, not completely original. And then to go along with the gold logo, I did brass screws. Okay, the grill cloth is not that exciting. At the time, I did not have access to good grill cloth. This is a burlap with all sorts of gold sparkles in it, which I thought was wonderful, and now I think is marginal. I may well replace it. Now let's turn it around and take a look at the back. Here's the rear of the amp. As you can see, I used the original lower back door, but I put in a new piece of screen and I recovered it with the same material that matches the front grille. Okay, I tried to brighten up the paint. I compounded and waxed the paint to spruce it up, and it came out a whole lot better than it was. Okay, you notice that we have microphone input and 2 instrument inputs, and I put a high gain little sticker up here to warn me. This has a lot less impedance, and when you plug in here, you better have the volume down because it's loud. Okay, that's probably for the microphone for singing or harmonica, or probably, you know, who knows what, yodeling. Now, this is the dedicated volume control just for the microphone input. This is the volume control for the 2 instrument inputs, and this is the tone control. Okay, as is obviously labeled here. I'm elaborating on the obvious. Toggle, fuse, indicator light. Replaced all the missing screws. Also, these screws go into wood, and the wood was rotted, so this whole piece, when you picked up the amp, wanted to just fall out on the ground. It didn't appear that that had ever happened, but the prospect led me to do a lot of wood replacement and repair throughout the amplifier before I covered it. Okay, you just can't glue a bunch of fairly expensive material on an old rotted carcass of an amplifier and hope for it to look good. It's like painting a car without doing any body work. Okay, so the woodwork was extreme, but it did come out nice and smooth, and it's rock solid. Now let's pull the back door and take a look inside. Well, here we are with the lower back door off, and hopefully the comparison will be quite favorable to the original picture. A brand new rock solid floor, all new framing wood around the perimeter of the back door opening. Speaker baffle is redone. The bracing has been replaced inside. I actually stained the walls. I got all carried away. I figured let's make it look as nice as possible. And then, as much as I hated to part with that magnificent Radio Shack speaker, I found a Rolla, old vintage Rolla 12-inch speaker that has the code 285 7, and it's 7308. So this is a 1973 speaker. It has a 7 though, so give me credit. I mean, in a 1947 amp, I guess there's a sort of an indirect connection. Okay, I hope in your mind this looks a little better than it did before. Okay, let's pull out the chassis and take a look at one of the stranger chassis that you're ever going to see. Before we take a look at the chassis, let's take a look at the schematic so we'll know what we're looking at when we do look at the chassis. Okay, here's the microphone input. Now, one thing that's very unusual are these 2 preamp tubes. They're 7B4 Loctal tubes. For those of you who never heard of a Loctal tube, I'll show them to you in just a minute. They're very unusual. I think they were created for military purposes. But look here, microphone input goes to the grid of the first preamp tube. The 2 instrument inputs bypass the first preamp and go into the second. So if you go into the microphone, you go through 1, 2 preamp tubes before you go on to the 6J5, whereas if you go in the instrument input, you only go through 1 preamp tube before you get to the 6J5. Okay, this has a transformer instead of a phase inverter tube, and the transformer drives the 2 6V6 output tubes in push-pull through originally an electrodynamic speaker. Well, that's long gone, and modifications have been made to the chassis so that it can use a permanent magnet speaker, which is that Rolla speaker that I showed you. One other thing that's unusual about this is it has dual rectifiers. There's 2 6X5 rectifiers, okay, and nothing much else is out of the ordinary. But back in the old days, there weren't many amps that had dual rectifiers, that had, in the case of the microphone input, 3 stages of amplification. Okay, so it's rather unusual. And wait till you get a gander at those Loctal tubes. They are really strange. Okay, here we are looking down on the top of a rather corroded looking chassis. These are the 2 Loctal tubes. I'll pull one out in just a second and show it to you with these really kind of crude corrugated shields. This is the 6J5, which is the second or third stage of amplification. This is that output transformer that was hanging from the wall of the cabinet so ingloriously. I've mounted it here. This was the plug that used to go to the electrodynamic speaker, and this was riveted to that basket. So originally the electrodynamic speaker with that umbilical cord that we're used to seeing with that type of speaker would plug in here. Well, now since it's a permanent magnet speaker, the output transformer has been transplanted to the chassis, and I just had it plug in. Rather than leave the plug blank, I just used it to connect the output transformer. These here are the 2 6V6 output tubes. Here's the 2 6X5 rectifiers, a big healthy power transformer, and a couple filter capacitors, CAN filter capacitors, most of which have been replaced. They had to be on this. Okay, you see how it actually supports itself. It has legs front and back, which are kind of nice. Okay, let me pull a Loctal tube and we'll take a look. The first thing that's a little unusual about Loctal tubes are the sockets. As you can see, this central keyed area is lined with metal, which corresponds to this great big metal prong that comes out the bottom of the tube. Okay, now it's continuous with this aluminum base of the tube, which gives you some shielding, but mainly this big prong gives you a secure hold on the socket, so that in military use, now you can imagine back in World War II, the radios had tubes, and can you imagine if you're in a tank or a jeep or an aircraft, totally dependent on your radio, and all the tubes vibrate and fall out and they're rolling around on the floor, and it's going to make survival a little difficult. So for the military, they came up with this idea with this stout metal locking base. These tubes are actually not that hard to find, and they're not all that terribly expensive, but they were only made for a short period of time. And one other thing, this is a 7, it's very hard to see, a 7B4. Even though they start with a 7, the filament voltage is still 6.3 volts. Okay, so very unusual tubes, short-lived, but they serve their purpose. Here's the underside of the chassis. It required a lot of work. The rodents, I guess, had been gnawing on the capacitors and on the wiring, and I had to replace almost all of them, all the filter capacitors and most of the other operational capacitors, some of the wiring. Here you see the shielded cables of the instrument input coming to the volume control and then coming over here to the 7B4. You see the microphone input just coming straight to the first 7B4. Filter choke. This had to be bent to clear the speaker. I don't know what type of weird, unless it was a 10-inch electrodynamic speaker that was in here, and but with a 12-inch, this had to be bent. Okay, so it's a very nice, quiet amp with really good volume, especially if you plug into the microphone input, and really good tone, as we will see shortly. I'm going to button this up and we're going to listen to it. I'm going to try a new format on the kind of sound testing of the amps, and I would like to hear from you, see what you think of this. I'm going to change my style of sound checking. Okay, so I'll see you in a few minutes.